Despite Starfield's best efforts to pretend that it doesn't, the game does actually do its planet's surfaces at least somewhat properly. You probably know already that it takes into account the day-night cycle and the angle of the sun in the sky based on where on the planet that you're landing, but it also correctly maps out the bit of the planet that you choose to land. For instance, it might just be an 8km square patch of land that tells you to turn back if you travel too far, but the regions in and around that patch of land will match up with what's seen on this planet's screen. Take Montara Luna for example. This very exciting moon contains oceans, savannas, swamps, forests, hills and frozen plains. But if you land somewhere between these two biomes, you'll see where the transition occurs. So I attempted to land between the frozen plains and the hills. My first attempt was unsuccessful because even though I thought I had clicked within pixels of the transition, my first landing spot was entirely surrounded by red hill regions. But I still had to show you because it looks so pretty. However, my second landing attempt was a great success, and I could easily see where the white snowy places ended and where the red hilly ones began. You can see that the ground does fade gradually and convincingly, with more and more visible patches of the area that it's transitioning into. And the snowy trees make way for similarly coloured, grey, unhealthy looking ones, which also looks quite subtle and convincing. But these rock models here transition a lot more abruptly, going from snowy to not snowy at all. A bit surprising given how much effort Skyrim went to shower stuff in varying degrees of snow. But this is a sign that this game isn't really designed for you visiting these middling areas. But still, I'm impressed, because I'm sure that many players will play through and finish this game without ever knowing that it's gone to such efforts to model the planet's surfaces. It makes me think that if it weren't for the invisible boundaries and probably all the other engine limitations, then in this game you'd have entire islands and continents that you'd be able to travel across, if you're boring enough to attempt such a feat. But don't worry, Ogreb will do it for you. So while I'm in the hilly region of this particular planet, let's hop on over to where these hills give way to the forests. From where I landed my spaceship, it wasn't entirely clear to me where this would take place. So I checked my compass, saw that the transition to forests should be somewhere in the southeast, and headed in that direction and up to the top of this mountain. Ogreb ran and ran and ran and ran and got a rather pleasant view from the top. Just for comparison, here is a similar view in Skyrim. Yeah, apparently that game didn't even attempt to light distant scenery. It all looks very murky and shrouded in fogovision. However, my view from Starfield has no such shroud issues, and as such, seeing the divide between hill and forest biome is rather obvious. A clear line, making the biomes appear like very large square areas. Almost like pixels. Individual pixels on a planet-wide texture. That being said, if there was a way to fly a craft in from space and down to ground level like this, then I would totally be for it. For the next, I took a trip to the sea. I started in a coastal swampal region and soon made it to the water. But it seemed like I was in the wrong place, as along the coast in both directions were lovely big mountains that I could climb for a better view. So I tried to land on one of those distant mountains by trying to land at the closest location to my existing one as I could, though I'll just say now I doubt they were the same ones as I saw previously, given that the map overview does its best to prevent you from doing this. I travelled to a few spots along this bit of coast, and each accurately mapped which direction the water was relative to the swamp, but it was incredibly difficult to figure out how big this bay was. Was it a kilometre across? 10? 7,369? I'm sure eventually we'll figure it out. For now, I was more interested in the sheer amount of diversity all these different swamp regions had. This was apparently swamp, but to me it looked more like a volcanic wasteland. So maybe running across an entire continent wouldn't be such a dull and repetitive affair after all. You see that massive mountain in the distance? Well, next I did a great job of landing very close to where I was stood previously, which I predicted would be somewhere on the other side of this mountain. Sure enough, I saw one in the distance, ran towards it and climbed it, in the hope it would be the same one as the one I saw from the other side. Turning this corner was a meaningful moment for me, for reasons I'm not sure I can convey to you that well. There was just something about this massive steep scree slope, lit by the evening sun on an alien planet, that made me feel all warm and cosy inside. Quite an achievement, bearing in mind that this likely has never been seen, let alone made, by a human ever before. So while this mountain had a very similar shape to the one I had seen from my previous landing spot, the surroundings looked different, and after running down the side of it and viewing it back again, it became much more apparent that this was not the same mountain as I had seen previously. So to state the obvious, this stretch of coastline is probably much, much bigger than I'm giving it credit for. I landed in one final place in this region, this time on the southern side of the coastline, and there were some massive mountains here. And from the top of this one I could seemingly see right across to the northern side of the bay, and also the western side, and also the eastern. What's going on here? So it turns out that the ocean's draw distance is shorter than the ground beneath it, for whatever reason. I think that's a bit of an oversight, and so what I was seeing in the distance here was probably just the seabed stretching out in all directions. And sure enough, as I descended the mountain again, it became apparent that all I had seen was beneath the sea line. And then Ogrub accidentally gained another ship. Where was I? Ah yes, Ogrub's been on many expeditions so far, and from all these we've learned nothing and it's been a complete waste of time. But don't worry, all that will change very shortly. But the scale of this world is just too great for this strategy of approximately clicking somewhere to ever work. I can't just look at a large feature like this and to assume that it's going to look like a bay of some sort. It probably is hundreds of miles across. So Ogrub switched his approach, finding the tiniest island that he could. This was it. This was to be his rock until he's figured out Starfield's deepest mysteries. There was just one problem. The weather was terrible. Now, nobody likes playing a Bethesda game when it's dark and depressing, but when Ogrub's actual goal is to map out this island's terrain, poor visibility like this is catastrophic. So he slept. He rested for an entire day and an entire night. And Sarah, bless her heart,
Time to get back to the world, eh?
sat patiently by. And yet the bad weather continued, so he slept for another 24 hours. And Sarah didn't leave his side, sitting bolt right in the chair the whole time, like any normal human would.
Had a good sleep?
Yet the bad weather persisted, so he slept for another 24 hours.
You are the soundest sleeper I've ever seen.
And then another.
Sleep well, love.
And
Time
another.
to face the day.
Weeks passed on this planet, months elsewhere.
Sleep? Come on, sleepyhead. Hello, sleepyhead. Hello, sleepyhead.
Grant me strength!
Nations rose and fell, people lived out entire lives, while Ogrub waited for this damn storm to pass. Yet it refused to budge. So Ogrub got out of the ship and fast travelled back to it again, whereupon he was greeted with beautiful sunshine. What a waste of life.
Gorgeous day, isn't it?
Having mastered the weather, Ogrub then revisited this island again and again and again, until he knew it inside out. Now I know you don't care about the weeks of life Sarah wasted, waiting for Ogrub to wake up. I don't either. But Ogrub and I spent 2 real, entire days just exploring this island. This isn't some fake wasted life we're talking about here, it's my real life. 2 days of it, watching Ogrub's flabby torso jiggle about as he ran literally dozens and dozens and dozens of kilometres. You thought he ran far in Skyrim, but that's nothing compared to his adventures on this island, as he attempted to piece together the waterline and the mountain ridges of this modest little island. And he found out some incredible stuff. Don't let the look of it fool you. This island's shape is a square, comprising of 9 different regions. There are 8 around the outside, all of which are touching the sea in some way, and 1 central area with no sea. In other words, it's an island. And better still, he could predict with high accuracy which bit of it he would land on every time. The whole thing was flipped. Clicking on the map until he found the absolute bottom edge of where the ocean met the island, he'd appear at the top of the island. Likewise, clicking until he found the absolute top right edge of the island, he'd land on the bottom left of the island, and so on. It was fairly reliable, but he didn't always land where he wanted to. I suppose mapping out square regions on a globe results in some funky skewed lines on the world map. You can see this most clearly when I turn the materials overview on. Instead of a clean grid, it's all kind of skewed and stretched. Let me give you a demonstration. Here is a tomato timer, and here is a sheet of paper covered in squares. Look, now they're all weirdly shaped. This is loosely connected with what we Europeans call the hedgehog theorem, but for once I actually prefer the American term, being the hairy bull theorem. It's about how bulls don't play well with stuff like hair and grits. Look at the silly looking hair on this horse's face. I bet there's a place on these planets just like this. Probably near the poles somewhere, because knowing Bethesda, they fucked those places up as well. But that's to explore another time. For now, Ogrub's focus is on mapping out this island, and he devised a way to test whether the same features can be seen from different regions. He noticed a very large and prominent mountain ridge up here, so he planned to land either side of it and to travel to it. Sort of like what he was doing earlier in this video along the coast, only this time he knows that these 2 regions are next to each other. But will they share the same mountains where they connect? So he ran and ran and ran and ran, and about 2 kilometers into this run, he eyed up the mountain range that he believed divided the two regions. Obviously, being seen from either side, they looked quite a bit different, and he didn't want to get his hopes up too much, for he had been burnt before. Do you think these are the same mountains? Leave your answer in the comments section below. Ogreb seems certain. His main concern is that he'd run into an invisible barrier before he can reach them. From this way, he was able to ascend the mountain ridge, but he was stopped just before he could pass over the top. Infuriating. But he could still sneak a view from around the side of it, and hopefully here he was peering into the connecting region. Meanwhile, in this connecting region, his journey was stopped a fair bit short of reaching the mountain ridge. So it turns out these regions, despite being next to each other, do not overlap. What a shame. But, looking back the way he had just come, Ogreb could see two very large mountains which would hopefully be visible from both views at once. And sure enough, there they are. This is it. This is the proof we've been looking for that Starfield's world does connect. You could, in theory, travel all the way around Starfield's planets seamlessly. Only obviously you can't because these invisible barriers do exist, and each neighbouring region doesn't overlap. In fact, there's a small area between each that you can't reach from the region either side, meaning that every few pixels on this world map is roughly 10 kilometers across. Knowing this makes the invisible barriers all the more infuriating, doesn't it? But maybe, just maybe, Ogreb can find a way to walk more than one region across Starfield's landscapes. But for this, Ogreb's going to finally have to cheat, because it turns out it is possible to disable the invisible barriers by adding this line to Starfield's INI file. And this let him travel quite a bit further beyond the boundary. But there's a reason that these barriers exist, and once he had walked far enough, the game eventually crashed. The big question is, will it let Ogreb walk far enough to join up with the next region along? So this was the plan. Ogreb ran to the edge of the first zone's barrier, that thanks to this cheat, could pass a fair bit beyond before the game eventually crashed at this point here. Then, he loaded the game up again, took off from the first zone, landed in the next region along, with the intention being to run back the other way again as far as he could, in the hope that he could reach far enough back to get to where he was when it crashed the first time. But there was a big problem. With a simple enough solution. So he ran and ran back from whence he came, hoping he'd be able to reach that tall mountain in the distance before the game crashed again. And he managed it, with it eventually crashing the exact moment he reached where he had reached the first time, meaning that the crash occurs precisely at the midway point between two different regions. This means, using this method, Ogreb can create a seamless speedrun across more than one region of Starfield. But there's zero margin extra, not a meter of overlap to spare, and loading the game up when he's beyond the invisible barriers would break it horribly. Still, with enough time and effort, and being careful to match up the location, direction, weather and time of day, Ogreb will now string together all these different runs into a much longer one across the entire island. He reached the end of the first area and there's the transition. Almost perfect. And he ran some more, this time heading towards the two mountains he had seen in the distance previously, which at this point he had obsessed about for several full days of testing. And they led to a valley down the middle, eventually opening up on one side, before later dropping down to sea level again. He felt he had been running this middle zone for ages, but he was still only halfway across. He then headed towards the sea and a storm came in, and he had a dilemma between a seamless speedrun or switching the last segment to nice weather again. He chose nice weather, but it wasn't to last, and before long the storm clouds were back again. But they didn't last long, and half an hour later he had done it, an unprecedented 24 kilometers in the same direction, making this the longest distance speedrun ever attempted in a single player Bethesda game released since Daggerfall. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Ogreb felt happy and excited for what the future might hold. He had already discovered so much, yet knew he could count on a Bethesda game like Starfield to provide him with countless more exciting game-breaking bugs and unforgivable coding glitches for his future journeys to yet uncover. He's going to dive straight in.